Bang! Glass exploded inwards, spraying across the expensive leather seat. The passenger window imploded. Clara screamed, ducking instinctively as the man beside her barked, "Down!" Just seconds before, she'd been frozen, staring down the cold barrel of his gun. "Who are you?" he'd demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "Who sent you?" Now any answer was lost in the roar of the engine and the thump, thump, thump of bullets tearing into the car's frame. He wrenched the wheel tires, screaming on rain-slicked asphalt, launching them violently into the stormy night. A terrified waitress and a hunted stranger trapped together in a race against death. The rain didn't just fall, it assaulted the city. It hammered the greasy windows of the 24-hour diner like a furious drum solo, each crack of thunder overhead punctuating the rhythm. Tucked away at the city's frayed edge, the diner hummed under the tired buzz of flickering fluorescent lights, a symphony of clattering dishes and the shuffle of weary feet. Clara Morgan moved through it all like a ghost, haunting the worn vinyl booths. 25, but feeling closer to 45 tonight. She balanced a tray holding 2 lukewarm coffees, her smile stretched thin. A practiced mask that didn't quite reach the exhaustion pooled deep in her eyes. Her cheap sneakers were soaked through, squelching softly with every step. Her apron, a canvas of 100 forgotten meals, clung damply to her uniform. Every muscle in her body screamed from the strain of another endless night shift surviving on caffeine and the sheer will to make rent this month. The digital clock above the grimy coffee machine blinked a merciless 3:17 a.m. Outside, the storm raged on, mirroring the tempest in Clara's own weary soul. She gathered her tips, a pathetic handful of crumpled bills and loose change, and stuffed them into the pocket of her thin coat, a quick, tired wave to Sal, the sleepy cook already half dozing by the grill, and she pushed open the heavy glass door, stepping out into the downpour. The cold rain hit her like a physical blow. She fumbled for her phone, clutching it tight. The screen was a spiderweb of cracks, the battery icon glowing a desperate red at 1%. 15 minutes ago, she'd ordered a rideshare, a small luxury she could barely afford, but the thought of the long, wet walk home was unbearable tonight. All she craved was the anonymous darkness of a back seat, the blessed silence after the diner's constant noise, a momentary escape before facing her tiny empty apartment. Through the sheets of rain near the mouth of a dark alleyway, a car idled, sleek, black, expensive. Its engine hummed a low, powerful thrum, and the tinted windows glistened, reflecting the erratic streetlights. It looked right. Same color as the app described, same location. PIN, no other cars were visible on the desolate street. Too tired, too soaked, too utterly drained to second-guess, Clara hurried towards it. She yanked the back door open, the weight of it surprising her, and practically dove inside her wet jacket, leaving dark trails on the ridiculously plush leather seat. Just as the door clicked shut behind her, sealing her inside the sudden, unexpected luxury, a fleeting thought crossed her mind. Well, at least the seats are more comfortable than I expected. Finally, she muttered, relief washing over her. I thought you'd never click. The sound was sharp, metallic, final. It sliced through the air, freezing the breath in her lungs. Her relief evaporated, replaced by a cold, paralyzing dread. Slowly, hesitantly, she lifted her head. The barrel of a gun was pointed directly at her face. In the driver's seat, a man turned his movements, fluid and controlled. Despite the dim light, shadows obscured much of his face, but his eyes, when they found hers, were like chips of steel, cold, unblinking. His voice when he spoke was low-measured and laced with deadly intent. "Who are you?" The words hung in the air, heavy as the storm outside Clara's heart slammed against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. What? No, wait! She stammered, hands instinctively flying up in surrender. I just got off work. At the diner, I thought this was my ride. Don't lie to me. His voice cut again, sharp as glass. The gun didn't waver. You knew exactly where I'd be. Who sent you? Who are you working for? Nobody. The word ripped from her throat, raw with terror. I swear I'm not working for anyone. I'm just a waitress. I don't know who you are. Silence descended thick and suffocating. For a heart-stopping moment, neither moved. Rain hammered against the roof. The man's finger seemed to tighten almost imperceptibly on the trigger. Clara could see the calculation in his eyes. The dangerous assessment. Was he deciding whether to believe her, or deciding where to dump her body before he could make his choice? Chaos erupted. Bang! The passenger side window exploded inwards, showering the interior with glittering shards of safety glass. Clara screamed, ducking instinctively, curling into a ball on the seat as more shots rang out, tearing into the car's frame with vicious thuds. Down the man barked his voice, suddenly stripped of its cold calm, replaced by urgent command. He twisted the wheel violently, the tires screeching in protest on the wet asphalt. The car lurched forward, throwing Clara sideways against the door. They sped into the storm-lashed darkness. The city lights blurring into streaks of neon through the rain-streaked windows. Another shot whizzed past behind them, then another. Why are they shooting at us? Clara shrieked terror, making her voice high and thin. Shut up! He snapped his focus entirely on navigating the treacherous streets. You brought them here, didn't you? No, I swear I didn't. I don't know anything. More gunfire erupted. The rear-view mirror shattered. The man slammed his foot on the accelerator, pushing the powerful engine to its limit. They careened through narrow side streets and dark alleys, tires skidding the sleeping city, flashing past in a terrifying rain-blurred montage. Clara clung to the expensive leather seat, her knuckles white, her mind desperately trying to catch up to the nightmare she'd stumbled into. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the rain still dripping from her hair. Please! She sobbed the word, barely audible over the engine's roar and the pounding rain. Please, I don't know who you are. I don't know what this is. I just wanted to go home. The man didn't answer. He drove like a man possessed like his life, and now inexplicably hers, depended on every turn, every split-second decision. Finally, after an eternity stretched thin by terror, the gunfire faded behind them. The pursuing headlights vanished from the side mirrors. Silence returned, heavy and tense, broken only by the relentless drumming of rain and the ragged sound of their breathing. He navigated onto a deserted industrial road, lined with skeletal trees and dim flickering streetlights, before turning sharply into the shadowed lot of a massive abandoned warehouse. Its windows were dark, boarded-up eyes staring blankly into the storm. He killed the engine, the sudden silence deafening. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his chest heaving. Clara didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe. His voice, when it finally came, was rough, controlled again, but tinged with exhaustion. Welcome to the temporary hotel. Clara still pressed against the door, like a cornered animal, could only whisper, her voice trembling. At least there's no extra charge for room service. The warehouse air was cold and damp, smelling faintly of mildew and old machinery. It was a stark, echoing space, the luxury of the bullet-riddled car outside, feeling like a distant, feverish dream. Clara hugged herself, shivering, though whether from cold or residual fear, she couldn't tell the man. He hadn't offered a name yet. Moved with a quiet intensity, checking the crude fortifications he'd apparently set up. Reinforced steel bars on the main door wires, snaking towards unseen sensors. He finally turned back to her, his expression unreadable in the dim light cast by a single bare bulb hanging overhead. "You need to understand," he began, his voice low. "And even you can't leave. Not yet." Clara stiffened, pulling her damp coat tighter. "What do you mean? I can't leave. You can't just keep me here." He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. It was the first sign of weariness she'd seen from him. Those men who attacked us. They weren't random. They were professionals. They were hunting me. Now that they've seen you with me, even briefly, you're a liability. If you walk out that door, they'll find you. And through you, they'll find me again. I can't let that happen, for both our sakes. So what, I'm your prisoner? Her voice trembled with indignation and fear. "No," he said, meeting her gaze directly. There was no threat in his eyes now, only a grim certainty. "I'm not going to tie you up. But I am asking you, strongly, to stay put, just until the immediate heat dies down, until I know it's safe." He gestured vaguely around the desolate space. "It's not much, but it's secure, for now." Clara paced back and forth on the dusty concrete floor, her mind racing. "This is insane. You expect me to just hide out in an abandoned warehouse with a stranger who got shot at?" He leaned against a stack of crates, crossing his arms. For a long moment, he just watched her assessing. Then he seemed to make a decision. "My name," he said quietly, "is Ethan Cole." He paused as if the name itself carried weight. "And you're right. This is insane. But it's the reality I live in." He hesitated, then continued the words, seeming dragged from a place he kept locked away. "I wasn't always. I used to run a private security firm. High-level contracts intelligence work. Made more money than I knew what to do with." A flicker of something, pain, bitterness, crossed his face. Then I uncovered something I shouldn't have. Something involving powerful people. People who don't like loose ends. His voice hardened. "They came after me. Not just me, my family. They destroyed my company, ruined my reputation, drove my brother." He stopped, swallowing hard. "They made sure everyone believed I was dead. It was the only way to disappear, to survive." Clara stared at him, speechless. A millionaire security expert, hunted living off the grid. It sounded like something out of a movie. Not her life, Ethan pushed away from the crates. The point is, those resources that money, accessing any of it, now using my old identity in any way, would be like sending up a flare. It would bring them right back down on me. So this, he gestured again, at the warehouse, is what I have. He turned away, walking towards a shadowed corner where a makeshift cot sat beside a table cluttered with electronic equipment. Later, while Ethan was engrossed in the glowing screens of his surveillance monitors, his back to her, Clara saw him reach into a worn duffel bag. He pulled out a small framed photograph. The glass was cracked, the image inside slightly scorched at the edges, but she could make out the faded image of a smiling family. A woman, a younger man who looked like Ethan, and an older couple. He held it for a long moment, his thumb gently tracing the figures. His shoulders slumped. The tough, controlled exterior seemed to momentarily dissolve, revealing a raw grief beneath. Then, just as quickly, he tucked the photo carefully back into the bag. The mask firmly back in place. Clara felt a pang of sympathy, quickly followed by a fresh wave of fear. What kind of monster could drive a man to this? Who was he fighting? She needed answers. While Ethan was outside, briefly checking the perimeter in the now lessening rain, Clara's anxiety warred with her caution. He hadn't explicitly forbidden her, but his files and equipment were spread across the main table. She told herself, It was self-preservation. She needed to know what she was caught up in. Her hands trembled as she carefully sifted through a stack of papers. Printouts of financial records, encrypted emails, grainy surveillance photos, names and corporations she didn't recognize swam before her eyes. Then she saw it. A formal corporate profile. Printout, a black and white headshot stared up at her. A man with cold eyes, a smug set to his jaw, looking impeccably wealthy and utterly ruthless. Beneath the photo, a name, Marcus Thorne. Clara's blood ran cold. Thorne, the name echoed in her mind, unlocking a Pandora's box of buried pain. She didn't just know that name. It was seared into her memory, synonymous with the destruction of her own family. Flashback. A memory surfaced sharp and painful. Her father slumped at the kitchen table years ago, head in his hands, foreclosure notices spread out before him. His hopeful talk about a can't-miss investment opportunity, promoted by the charismatic tycoon, Marcus Thorne. The subsequent betrayal, the lost savings, the crushing debt, the desperate quiet that fell over their house, the pitying looks from neighbors. And then, the final deafening silence, after her father gave up completely. She'd been 16. The name Thorne had been poison ever since. Her breath hitched. Her hands shook violently as she dropped the paper back onto the table, as if it had burned her. The man Ethan Cole was hunting, the man whose enemies had nearly killed them both tonight, was the same man who had destroyed her father and shattered her world. It couldn't be possible. The coincidence was too cruel, too staggering. Just then, the side door creaked open, and Ethan stepped back inside, shaking rain from his coat. He stopped abruptly when he saw her face. The color drained from it, her eyes wide with horror. Staring at the file on the table. "What is it?" he asked, instantly alert. "What did you find?" Clara couldn't speak for a moment. She pointed a trembling finger at the photograph of Marcus Thorne. Him, she finally choked out her voice, thick with resurrected grief and a sudden burning rage. "Why him? Why is he the one you're after?" Ethan tensed his gaze, flicking down to the photo, then back to her shocked face. "You went through my files. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement. I had a right." She cried, tears finally breaking free, hot and angry. "That man, Marcus Thorne, he didn't just ruin you, Ethan. He ruined me. He destroyed my family. My father trusted him, invested everything. We lost our home, my college savings, everything." Her voice cracked raw with years of suppressed pain. "My dad, he took his own life because of that man's lies." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy and devastating. Ethan stared at her, his own shock mirroring hers. The anger in his eyes softened, replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding. "I knew Thorne ruined lives," he said quietly, his voice strained. "I've traced dozens of his victims, good people financially wiped out by his schemes. But I never knew it touched you. I didn't know about your father. You should have told me who you were after." "I didn't think it mattered to you," he shot back, frustration edging his voice. "How could I know?" "Well, it does matter," Clara snapped, wiping furiously at her tears. "Because I thought I was just some random waitress who made a stupid mistake, caught in your mess. But now this feels like something else entirely. Something personal." Ethan stepped closer, the vast, cold warehouse seeming to shrink around them. The air crackled with shared history, shared pain, shared enemy. He looked at her truly, looked at her, not as an inconvenience or a liability, but as a fellow survivor scarred by the same man. "I swear, Clara," he said, his voice low and intense. "I never planned for anyone else to get dragged into this, especially not like this." He paused, his gaze searching hers. "But maybe this wasn't just an accident. Maybe the universe finally decided to throw us both a lifeline." Clara met his gaze, her own anger slowly giving way to a dawning, fierce resolve. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. A burning need for justice. "That man deserves to pay for what he did," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "To my family, to yours, to everyone else, he's destroyed." She took a step towards him, closing the distance. "And I'm not just going to sit here and let you take him down, alone." A silent understanding passed between them, forged in the crucible of their shared trauma. They were no longer just strangers, bound by a violent coincidence. They were allies, united by a single, powerful purpose. "We do this," smart Ethan said, finally, his voice regaining its edge, but now directed towards a common goal. "We expose him, legally, financially, publicly. We burn his empire to the ground, but we do it right." Clara nodded, a bitter smirk touching her lips. "Then let's go ruin Marcus Thorne's life, together." The air in the warehouse shifted in the days that followed. The initial shock and raw grief began to settle, replaced by a tense, focused energy. The fragile alliance between Clara and Ethan, born from shared trauma and a common enemy, started to solidify into something more tangible, a plan. It was Clara who proposed it. Surprisingly, they were sharing a meager meal of canned soup and crackers, a far cry from the diner's greasy offerings, yet somehow more substantial, when she looked up from tracing patterns on the dusty table. "Marcus Thorne," she said the name, tasting like ash in her mouth. "He throws a huge charity gala every year, the Haverley Foundation Gala. It's his big public relations stunt, donating a fortune to look good while laundering twice as much behind the scenes." Ethan looked up sharply, his eyes narrowed. "How do you know that?" Clara shrugged, a wry twist to her lips. "Perks of being invisible. I waitressed that gala 3 years in a row before wealthy people talk like you're part of the furniture. You hear things." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "It's next week. It's our best chance to get close to him. Ethan, close enough to get real evidence." Ethan immediately shook his head, his expression hardening. "Absolutely not, Clara. It's too dangerous. That place will be crawling with his personal security, not to mention the regular event guards. These aren't just thugs. They're professionals. If they even suspect you're anything other than staff—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. The memory of the bullet-shattered window was still fresh, and what's the alternative? Clara challenged, her voice gaining strength. "Sit here hiding while you go out there alone. Wait for his people to find us. Eventually, I stumbled into this mess. Ethan. But Thorne did things to my family. He took my father from me. I'm not going to hide anymore. I'm tired of being scared. I want to do something." She met his gaze, unwavering. "I need to do this, but I need your help. Teach me." Ethan stared at her, clearly conflicted. He saw the fear still lingering in her eyes, but it was overshadowed now by a fierce determination he hadn't seen before. He remembered the terror in her voice just days ago, and now she was volunteering to walk directly into the lion's den. He hated the idea, hated putting her at risk, but he also recognized the steel in her spine, the same resilience that had likely kept her going long before she'd fallen into his dangerous world. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Clara?" he asked quietly. "Once you're in, there's no easy way out. If things go wrong, I haven't been sure about anything for a long time, she admitted honestly. But I'm sure about this. I won't be a victim anymore. Teach me how to fight back. And so the abandoned warehouse transformed into a makeshift training ground. The days took on a new rhythm, punctuated by the thud of practice falls, the low murmur of instruction, and the quiet clicks of unfamiliar technology. Ethan was a demanding but patient teacher. He started with the basics: situational awareness, blending into a crowd, recognizing surveillance, identifying escape routes. He showed her how to handle micro-recorders secreted in seemingly innocuous objects, like a cufflink or a brooch. Then came the self-defense. Ethan, despite his size and obvious skill, moved with controlled precision, demonstrating blocks, strikes, and escape maneuvers designed for leverage, not brute force. Clara, initially clumsy and hesitant, proved to be a surprisingly fast learner. Her years waitressing had given her a quickness, an ability to anticipate movement, and a core of unexpected toughness. During one session after hours of practice, she actually managed to knock him off balance, sending them both tumbling onto a pile of discarded canvas tarps. They landed in a heap, momentarily breathless. Clara pushed her hair out of her face, laughing despite herself. Maybe she gasped, a genuine smile finally reaching her eyes. I should just stick to carrying trays. Ethan looked down at her, a rare, almost imperceptible softening around his own eyes. He offered a hand to help her up. That skill in balance isn't useless either, he replied, his voice lacking its usual hard edge for just a second. His hand lingered in hers, perhaps a fraction longer than necessary, before he pulled away, clearing his throat. He taught her how to read lips from a distance, how to maintain a pleasant facade while scanning for threats, how to use everyday objects as potential weapons. Clara absorbed it all, driven by a purpose she hadn't felt in years. Sometimes, while meticulously assembling a tiny listening device Ethan had procured, she'd mutter under her breath, a wry observation escaping before she could stop it. Great add covert electronics assembly to the list of things a waitress never thought she'd need to know. The intensity of their training was broken by moments of forced calm, shared meals of canned goods, quiet evenings spent poring over blueprints of the gala venue, hushed conversations about neutral topics, the weather, bad coffee, the surprising durability of warehouse rats. They learned small things about each other in these stolen moments. Clara discovered Ethan had a dry, almost hidden sense of humor. Ethan saw the sharp intelligence and unwavering loyalty beneath Clara's quiet exterior. An unspoken trust grew between them, fragile yet persistent, like a stubborn vine finding purchase in concrete. The air often crackled with an unacknowledged tension, a magnetic pull they both carefully ignored. One afternoon, returning from a necessary supply run, food, water, and some untraceable burner phones, Ethan's approach to the warehouse was different. He cut the engine further down the road, observing the area for a long time before proceeding on foot, his movements tense. "What is it?" Clara asked, noticing the shift immediately when he finally entered. "A car," he said, curtly, checking the locks on the door again. "Parked down the street for almost an hour. Plain sedan. Nondescript. Could be nothing." He scanned his monitors intently, or it could be Thorne's people doing preliminary surveillance. The news sent a chill through Clara, a stark reminder of the real danger, lurking just outside their makeshift sanctuary. The training suddenly felt terrifyingly real. The gala wasn't a hypothetical exercise. It was a battlefield they were about to walk onto. That night, the easy banter was gone. A heavy silence settled between them as they reviewed the plan one last time. Ethan handed Clara a small, elegant evening bag. Hidden inside were the micro-recorder and a tiny panic button linked directly to one of his burner phones. "Are you ready?" Ethan asked, his voice quiet, his steel-grey eyes searching hers. Clara took a deep breath, clutching the bag. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach. But it was different now. It wasn't the paralyzing terror of a victim caught in the headlights. It was the sharp, focused fear of a soldier preparing for battle. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. He nodded slowly, a flicker of pride quickly masked in his expression. In that moment, looking at the determined set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes, Ethan. Cole knew this wasn't just his redemption story anymore. He had inadvertently drawn this courageous waitress into his war, and now, strangely unexpectedly, he wouldn't want to face it without her. The Haverley Foundation. Gala glittered obscenely. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto a sea of tailored tuxedos and shimmering gowns. The air hummed with forced laughter, discreetly murmured deals, and the clinking of champagne flutes, a symphony of wealth and influence. To Clara, stepping into the grand ballroom felt like entering an alien planet. Beautiful on the surface, but fundamentally hostile, she wore a simple borrowed black dress, elegant enough to blend in with the higher-end catering staff she was posing as. Her hair was swept back severely, one dark strand strategically covering the tiny earpiece connecting her to Ethan. In her hand, she carried a silver tray laden with champagne flutes, her knuckles white beneath her grip. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic counterpoint to the smooth orchestral music filling the room. "You're doing fine," Clara Ethan's voice murmured in her ear, calm and steady, a lifeline in the overwhelming opulence. "Stay relaxed, blend in. Thorn is by the north wall, near the large, abstract painting. Grey tuxedo holding court." Clara scanned the room, her eyes sweeping past oblivious faces. Then she saw him, Marcus Thorn. He looked older, more lined than in the photos, but the arrogance was unmistakable. He stood surrounded by admirers, laughing loudly at something one of them said, swirling amber liquid in a heavy crystal tumbler, as if he owned the very air they breathed. The man who had destroyed her father, smiling and accepting accolades, bile rose in her throat. She took a steadying breath, remembering Ethan's training. Control your breathing, neutral expression, purposeful movement. As she navigated the crowded floor, weaving between clusters of guests, a waiter passed her, carrying a tray of minuscule, elaborately constructed appetizers. Caviar glittered darkly on tiny toasts. Clara's stomach rumbled. She hadn't eaten much all day, and a wry thought surfaced. That single tray probably cost more than my rent this month, assuming you don't just inhale it in one bite. Focus, Clara. She recalibrated her gaze, locking back onto Thorn Ethan's voice. Guided her. "He's talking to Alderman Davies now. Perfect Davies is on his payroll. Move in, closer offer. Champagne, use it as cover to activate the recorder." Clara moved smoothly towards the group, her waitress smile firmly in place. "Champagne, sir," she offered, extending the tray towards Thorn and Davies. Thorn barely glanced at her, waving a dismissive hand. "Keep them coming." He grunted, already turning back to his conversation. Davies took a flute without looking. That dismissive glance, however brief, sent a shiver down Clara's spine. It was cold, assessing utterly devoid of human warmth. As she stepped back slightly, her fingers subtly brushed the clasp of the elegant evening bag slung across her shoulder. A tiny, almost imperceptible click confirmed the micro-recorder inside was active. Her heart pounded. Now she just had to stay close enough long enough. Through the surrounding buzz, she strained to hear Thorne's conversation, filtering it through the earpiece, relaying the recorder's feed to Ethan. Thorne was laughing, boasting quietly to Davies about a new offshore shell corporation, funneling funds disguised as charitable donations. He mentioned transferring assets to avoid upcoming regulatory scrutiny, naming account numbers, and a Cayman Islands bank Ethan had red-flagged in his research. It was exactly what they needed. Arrogant, incriminating, direct from the source. Got it. Clara Ethan's voice was tense but triumphant in her ear. Clear audio. It's enough, get out now. Service exit. B West corridor. Go relief washed over her, so potent, it almost made her dizzy. She turned, melting back towards the edge of the ballroom, aiming for the discreetly marked service corridor. She slipped behind a heavy velvet curtain and nearly collided with a man standing just inside the doorway. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo or a staff uniform. He wore a simple dark suit, but his eyes were sharp, alert, missing nothing. An earpiece was visible in his own ear. Thorne's personal security. Too alert, too fast. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. His eyes locking onto hers with unnerving intensity. Clara forced her practiced smile. "Restroom break," she said, perhaps a little too quickly. He glanced down at her empty tray, then back at her face. His eyes narrowed. "You're not on the staff roster." Panic seized her. She didn't wait for another word. She bolted. "Hey, stop her!" The shout echoed behind her, just as she shoved through the heavy door, leading into the brightly lit, sterile service hallway. Alarms suddenly blared overhead, triggered by the emergency exit. The chase was on. Clara ran, kicking off the impractical heels she wore, clutching them in one hand. Her lungs burned. Footsteps pounded behind her, closing the distance, down steel stairs echoing in the narrow shaft, through a steamy kitchen, dodging startled chefs, out into a dark, rain-slicked alleyway. The cold air hit her lungs. Freedom was just ahead. Then from the shadows at the alley's mouth, a motorcycle engine roared to life. Headlights cut through the darkness. "Clara, get on," Ethan shouted over the engine's growl. She didn't hesitate, scrambling onto the seat behind him, just as the security guard burst out of the kitchen exit. Behind her, reaching under his jacket, Ethan gunned the engine, the bike leaping forward, tires spraying water. They sped out of the alley engine, screaming. As they rounded a sharp corner onto another deserted industrial street, another figure stepped out from behind a dumpster, swinging something heavy. A metal pipe. He moved too fast. There was no time to swerve. Ethan reacted instantly. With a grunt, he twisted his body deliberately, putting himself between Clara and the incoming blow. The pipe connected hard against his shoulder and upper back with a sickening thud. He roared in pain, but somehow kept control of the bike, accelerating even faster. Weaving through the labyrinth of dark streets, Clara clung to him, burying her face against his back, trembling uncontrollably. She could feel the unnatural warmth seeping through his jacket where he'd been hit. They raced on the sounds of the city, the distant sirens, the rain, the engine's roar, eventually swallowing any sounds of pursuit. They disappeared into the anonymity of the night. Back in the cold sanctuary of the warehouse, Clara's hands shook so badly she could barely help Ethan off the motorcycle. He slumped against the wall, his face pale and beaded with sweat, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "You're hurt," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I've had worse," he muttered, but his attempt at bravado was unconvincing. He gritted his teeth against the pain. She eased him down onto the makeshift cot, gently pushing aside the torn fabric of his jacket. A deep, ugly bruise was already blooming across his shoulder blade and back, the skin split where the pipe had connected. "We need to get you to a hospital." "Ethan?" "No," he hissed through clenched teeth. No hospitals. They'll be watching ERs. Can't risk it. With trembling hands, Clara found the basic first aid kit Ethan kept stashed away. She cleaned the wound as gently as she could with antiseptic wipes, her touch hesitant. He flinched sharply but didn't pull away. She pressed gauze pads against the bleeding abrasion, her own fear momentarily eclipsed by a desperate need to care for him. They sat in silence for a long time, the only sounds the dripping rain outside and Ethan's pained breathing. Finally he looked up at her, his eyes dark with pain. And something else. Vulnerability, I thought. I thought I could keep you out of the direct line of fire. He rasped his voice, barely a whisper. Keep you safe. Away from what this life does. He reached out his fingers, stained slightly with his own blood, brushing against her hand where it rested on his uninjured arm. His touch sent an unexpected jolt through her. But you walked right in there tonight. Clara, you did what I haven't had the courage to do in years. Face him. His grip tightened, slightly trembling. If anything worse had happened to you, I wouldn't have forgiven myself. Clara didn't pull her hand away. She simply met his gaze, seeing past the tough exterior to the wounded man beneath. She held his hand tighter, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. They had the evidence. They had survived. But they had crossed a dangerous line, not just in their mission against Thorn, but in the tangled landscape of each other's lives. And the cost was etched in the pain tightening Ethan Cole's face. The days following the gala blurred into a strange suspended quiet. The storm outside had long passed, replaced by a hesitant sun that cast long dusty beams through the warehouse's grimy upper windows. The frantic energy of planning and training, the adrenaline high of the mission and escape had evaporated, leaving behind a heavy, contemplative silence. Ethan recovered slowly. His bruised back and shoulder still ached, restricting his movements, forcing a stillness upon him that felt unnatural. He spent hours staring at the encrypted drive containing the Thorn data, the prize they'd risked everything for, yet his expression held little triumph. Instead, Clara often saw him gazing into the distance, his brow furrowed, a conflict raging behind his steel-grey eyes. The path to destroying Thorn was clear, but what lay beyond that, the question hung unspoken in the cold air. Clara drifted through the warehouse, like a phantom tidying their small living space, making weak tea on the camping stove, changing Ethan's bandages with gentle, practiced hands. The forced proximity, the shared danger had forged an undeniable bond between them, something intense and real. But now, in the quiet aftermath, the chasm between their worlds seemed to yawn wider than ever. He was Ethan Cole, a man of wealth, power, and dangerous secrets, even if he was currently living off the grid. He had a past shrouded in shadows, and presumably a future waiting for him. Once Thorn was dealt with a future that involved reclaiming his life, whatever that now looked like. And she was Clara Morgan. A waitress, a survivor, yes, but one whose life was measured in unpaid bills and anxieties about the next shift. She had faced down danger, tapped into a strength she hadn't known she possessed. But looking at Ethan, watching him wrestle with demons she couldn't comprehend, she felt an old familiar wave of inadequacy wash over her. Where did she fit into his world, into his future? Could she ever truly belong? The evidence against Thorn was secure. Their shared mission, the justification for her presence here, was technically complete. Logic told her it was time to go disappear back into her own life before she got hurt again, before this fragile connection shattered under the weight of reality. The thought of leaving, of walking away from the intensity, The purpose, the unexpected warmth she'd found with Ethan, left a hollow ache in her chest. But wasn't it better to leave now on her own terms? One quiet afternoon, while Ethan seemed lost in thought, staring at the patterns of sunlight on the floor, Clara made her decision. Her heart felt like a lead weight. She gathered her few belongings. The clothes she'd arrived in now, washed and folded a spare T-shirt Ethan had given her the cheap burner phone. It all fit into a single flimsy plastic grocery bag. She scribbled a short, inadequate note. "Thank you. Be careful. Goodbye," and left it on the crate that served as her bedside table. Moving silently, she slung the bag over her shoulder and headed for the heavy side door. Her escape route. "Where are you going, Clara?" His voice, quiet but sharp, stopped her cold, just as her hand reached the cool metal of the door handle. She froze her back to him. She couldn't turn around, couldn't meet his eyes. Just stepping out for some air. She mumbled the lie, flimsy even to her own ears. She heard him shift the slight grunt of pain as he pushed himself up from the cot. With a bag, his voice was closer now. She could feel his presence behind her. "You were leaving, weren't you?" Clara swallowed hard the lump in her throat, making it difficult to speak. She finally turned, unable to meet his intense gaze, focusing instead on a crack in the concrete floor. Maybe I should go, Ethan. You have what you needed. The drive, the recording. You can finish this. You don't need me anymore." He stepped towards her, ignoring the pull in his injured shoulder, stopping just an arm's length away. The proximity made her skin prickle. "Is that what you think this was about?" He asked, his voice low, almost rough. "Just needing you for the mission?" She finally looked up, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. "Isn't it? Look at us, Ethan. You're you, and I'm just..." Her voice faltered. "I was just someone who got into the wrong car at the wrong time. I don't belong here." "Not really." Her gaze dropped again. I'm sure she added a hint of weary sarcasm creeping into her tone. Despite herself, a millionaire like you has plenty of people ready to help people who don't need to hide out in abandoned warehouses, but none of them are you, Clara. His response was immediate, cutting through her brittle attempt at deflection, his voice raw with an emotion that startled her. He reached out gently, taking her hand, the one not clutching the plastic bag. His touch was warm, firm, grounding her. "Do you really think that's all I see when I look at you?" He continued, his eyes searching hers. "Someone who was just convenient." Clara felt her throat tighten, the unshed tears threatening to spill over. "I don't know what you see," she whispered. "I only know what I see. A waitress whose family was ruined by the same man you're hunting. Someone who spent years just trying to keep her head above water. Someone who doesn't fit in your world." "My world," he gave a short, humorless laugh. "Clara, my world burned down. Thorne took care of that. This..." He gestured around the warehouse. "This is my world now." Or it was. His grip on her hand tightened almost imperceptibly, until you fell into it. He stepped even closer, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Do you want to know what I see?" His voice was softer now, intense. "I see the person who faced down Marcus Thorne with more courage than anyone I've ever known. I see someone who didn't run when the bullets started flying. I see the person who patched me up, who worried about me, who actually saw me. Not the ghost of who I was, or the mission I was on, but just me." He lifted his other hand, gently brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek. His touch lingered. "You dragged me back from the edge, Clara, You reminded me there was something worth fighting for beyond revenge. A single tear escaped tracing a path down her cheek. But I'm scared, Ethan. She confessed, her voice barely audible. I'm scared of what happens next. When this is over, we're too different. What if I'm not enough? The question hung between them, heavy with insecurity. He shook his head slowly, his eyes holding hers. You are enough, Clara, he said firmly, fiercely. More than enough. Do you know why I needed you here? Not just for the mission. Because you were the only person who didn't look at me with pity or fear or expectation. You were just real. You made me want to be better. Not just for vengeance, but for hope. He brought her hand up, pressing her palm gently against his chest over his heart. I don't want the life I had before. I don't care about the money. The name not anymore. I care about this. About us. I don't want a perfect life. Clara, I want a real one with you. Clara stared at him, her own heart aching with a terrifying mix of hope and fear. All the walls she'd built around herself, all the cynicism born from loss and hardship, seemed to crumble under the raw honesty in his eyes. Could she dare to believe him? Could she dare to hope for a future she never thought possible? I don't know how to start over Ethan. She whispered, the tears flowing freely now. I don't know how to trust that this won't all fall apart. He leaned his forehead against hers, his own eyes glistening. Then we figure it out, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Together. No more running, no more hiding. Just us right here. We start from here. Slowly, hesitantly. Clara let the plastic grocery bag slip from her fingers. It landed softly on the dusty floor. She raised her other hand, mirroring his, placing it gently against his chest. In the dim light of the warehouse, surrounded by the ghosts of industry and the wreckage of their past lives, two broken souls made a silent choice. They chose connection over fear, hope over despair. Ethan pulled her gently into his arms, holding her close. It wasn't the desperate cling of the alleyway chase, nor the careful proximity of the past few days. It was an embrace of acceptance, of promise, of a shared future, uncertain as it was. You're not alone anymore, Clara, he whispered into her hair. Not ever again. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she let herself believe it might be true. They didn't wait with the encrypted drive containing Marcus Thorne's recorded confessions and incriminating financial data. Ethan, guided by Clara's steadier hand, now executed the final phase of his long-planned offensive. It wasn't a declaration of war, but a quiet, calculated leak. Anonymous data packets, untraceable emails, sent simultaneously to a handful of trusted investigative journalists and international financial crime units Ethan had vetted years ago. Then they waited in the tense quiet of the warehouse. The digital bombs dropped. The countdown begun. The explosion, when it came, was deafening, even in their isolation. Within hours, news alerts flashed across the burner phone screens they use to monitor the outside world. Breaking billionaire magnate Marcus Thorne, implicated in massive fraud scandal, leaked files, allege widespread corruption, money laundering by Thorne Industries, whistleblower, data reveals. Years of deception. The media frenzy was instantaneous and brutal. Thorne's carefully constructed empire built on lies, and ruin began to crumble like sand through clutching fingers. His stock plummeted. His board members scrambled to distance themselves. Federal investigators raided his pristine corporate headquarters. Marcus Thorne, the untouchable tycoon, was suddenly very, very exposed. Within days, he was arrested, facing a barrage of charges that promised decades behind bars and the complete seizure of his ill-gotten assets. The wheels of justice, slow and cumbersome, had finally begun to grind him down. But the biggest blow was yet to come. Clara Morgan, the quiet waitress who had stumbled into the heart of the storm, was called to testify before a grand jury, and later potentially at trial. Her first-hand account of Thorne's methods, intertwined with the deeply personal story of her family's destruction, was deemed crucial. The thought initially sent waves of nausea through Clara, facing a room full of strangers, lawyers, potentially even Thorne himself, reliving the trauma publicly. But looking at Ethan, seeing the quiet conviction in his eyes, the belief in her, she found her strength. This wasn't just about her father anymore. It was for all the other families Thorne had shattered. It was for Helen's son. On the day of her grand jury testimony, she stood tall, dressed simply but with dignity. Ethan was there, a silent, steady presence in the back of the formal room. When Clara spoke, her voice didn't waver. She recounted the story, not with anger, but with a quiet, heartbreaking clarity. She spoke of her father's misplaced trust, of Thorne's calculated manipulation, of the devastating aftermath that led to his suicide. He wasn't just a number on a balance sheet. She concluded, her gaze sweeping across the jurors' faces. He was my father. Marcus Thorne didn't just steal our money. He stole our future. He stole my dad. I'm here today because the truth needs to be told, so this never happens to another family. A profound silence filled the room when she finished, later stepping out into the bright sunlight, blinking against the glare. Clara took a deep breath that tasted like release, heavy with sorrow, but lighter with justice. Ethan was waiting for her on the courthouse steps, his expression unreadable, but his eyes soft. "You did it, Clara," he said simply. She shook her head, managing a small, watery smile. "No, Ethan," she replied, reaching for his hand. "We did. They left the city that same week. The warehouse, their strange sanctuary and prison, was abandoned once more. They drove for hours, leaving the noise, the memories, and the media storm behind them, heading towards an uncertain future, armed only with each other and a fragile hope. They found a small run-down cabin to rent month to month in a remote wooded area hundreds of miles away. It wasn't much: peeling paint, drafty windows, plumbing that groaned in protest. But it was quiet, anonymous. It was a start. The first few weeks were an adjustment. Ethan, accustomed to command and control, found himself wrestling with simple domestic tasks. Clara found him one afternoon, staring in utter bafflement at a leaky kitchen faucet he'd been trying to fix for an hour, a wrench lying defeated beside him. She leaned against the doorframe, suppressing a smile. "You know?" she teased gently. "I think taking down a corrupt billionaire might have been easier for you than tackling that faucet." Ethan looked up, a sheepish grin finally breaking through his usual reserve. "Point taken," he conceded. "Some enemies are more persistent than others." He began the slow, careful process of untangling his legal existence, communicating sporadically through encrypted channels with a single trusted lawyer from his past life, exploring options for cautiously re-emerging without triggering old alarms. It was complex, frustrating work. Clara, meanwhile, found solace and purpose in writing. She started pouring their story, her story, his story, their story, onto the pages of a cheap notebook, the act of translating chaos into words becoming a form of therapy, a way to process and heal. A year passed. The leaky faucet was fixed. The cabin began to feel less like a hideout and more like a home. Ethan found a quiet satisfaction in restoring old furniture, bought cheap at local auctions. The physical labor grounding him. He planted a small vegetable garden out back. Clara's notebook had filled then another. Her book, tentatively titled The Wrong Car, was taking shape. It wasn't just about revenge or exposing Thorn. It was about resilience, unexpected connections, and finding light in the darkest of places. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Clara sat at the rough-hewn kitchen table, typing the final chapter, a hesitant knock echoed at the door. They exchanged a surprised glance. Visitors were rare. Ethan opened it cautiously. An older woman stood on the porch, bundled in a grey coat, her hands twisting nervously. Her eyes found Clara across the room, and tears immediately welled. "I'm so sorry to just show up," the woman said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "You're Clara. Morgan, aren't you?" Clara nodded, slowly rising from her chair. "Yes. Can I help you?" The woman stepped forward, her gaze full of a profound, weary sadness, yet tinged with gratitude. "My name is Helen," she said. "My son, David. He worked for Thorn Industries. He tried to blow the whistle years ago. Thorn destroyed him. His career, his reputation. He couldn't prove anything. He didn't survive it." Helen's voice broke. Clara's throat tightened with empathy. "But because of you," Helen continued, reaching out and taking Clara's hands in her own surprisingly strong grip, "because of what you both did. People know the truth now. The things David died trying to expose. They're out in the open. He didn't die for nothing." Tears streamed down her face. I had to find you. I had to say thank you." And then Helen pulled Clara into a fierce hug, an embrace that held years of grief, quiet anger, and now, finally, a measure of peace. Clara hugged her back, tears stinging her own eyes, understanding the depth of this stranger's pain and gratitude on a level few could. When Helen finally stepped back, Ethan had appeared silently behind Clara, his hand resting gently on her waist, a quiet anchor. They watched together as Helen walked slowly back down the gravel path, disappearing among the golden autumn leaves. Later, as the sun dipped behind the distant mountains, painting the valley in hues of orange and purple, Ethan wrapped his arms around Clara from behind. They stood together on the small wooden porch, breathing in the cool, clean air. No sirens wailed in the distance. No shadows lurked at the edges. No secrets festered between them. Just the whisper of wind through the pines and the steady, quiet rhythm of two hearts beating as one. No one was chasing them. They weren't running anymore. Ethan kissed her temple softly. She leaned back against him, closing her eyes, a profound sense of peace settling over her deeper than any she had ever known. They had faced the storm, navigated the wreckage, and somehow, against all odds, found their way here. To this quiet place, to each other. They had finally come home. And so, in the quiet stillness of that valley, Clara and Ethan finally found their anchor, after navigating such a violent storm. Their journey reminds us that sometimes the most terrifying detours, the moments we feel most lost, like stepping into the wrong car on a rainy night, can unexpectedly lead us somewhere we truly belong. Isn't it profound how healing can begin in the most broken places, and how the right person can feel like coming home no matter where you are? This story, with its twists of fate and testament to resilience, left a deep imprint on our hearts. Perhaps it resonated with you too. If Clara and Ethan's journey touched your soul, let us know in the comments below. Do you believe it was fate that brought them together in that car, or a series of courageous choices they made afterwards that truly defined their story? We truly value your thoughts and feelings, and your feedback is incredibly important as we strive to bring you more meaningful stories. If you have any suggestions on how we can improve or ideas for future stories you'd love to see, please share them with us in the comments. Your insights help us grow and create content that truly connects. If this story resonated with you, please show your support with a like. It lets us know we're on the right track. And if you think someone else might find hope or comfort in Clara and Ethan's journey from darkness to dawn, please share it with them. Most importantly, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss another journey into the heart of human resilience, unexpected connections, and the power of second chances. Thank you for sharing this time with us. This is Soul-Stirring Stories, where every tale is a journey home. We'll see you in the next story.